Welcome to Southbound, Settling in South Africa, a guide and companion for anyone looking to call this vibrant nation their home. I'm Jeremy Maggs, here to navigate you through the intricacies of a new life in South Africa. The series, brought to you by Xpatweb, aims to provide valuable insights and advice for a smooth transition and a successful life here on the southern tip of Africa. In each episode, we'll delve into various aspects of South African life, everything from moving money to immigration and property investment. So whether you're considering a move, already in the process, or just curious, you're in the right place. Stay with us as we embark on this journey together, uncovering all that South Africa has to offer. In this first episode, we're going to ask the question, why South Africa, and how to start the process. And I want to dive straight in. Keith Engel is a seasoned tax policy and international tax expert. He's originally from the United States and works in South Africa. And sitting next to him is Marisa Jacobs, Managing Director at Expatweb and heads up Expatriate Services. Her area of speciality includes South African work permits, particularly for employers with large groups of expatriates. To both of you, nice to have you on episode 1. Let's go, shall we? Keith, first of all, share a bit for me about your journey from the United States to South Africa and what motivated the move.
For me, it was a career move. So I think for a number of, high-level people, it is. For me, what I was trying to do is, I'm a tax person, I'm a tax lawyer, and I was in the United States and I was a professor. And one of the things that I specialized was comparative tax law. Most Americans, comparative tax law is tax people for the U.S. going abroad. It's just U.S. tax and that's it. I was doing more comparative work in the Commonwealth and other English-speaking countries. And so I got involved in the U.S. Treasury program. The U.S. Treasury at that time was supporting the South African government. And so they were trying to help build the South African Treasury recover from the pre-94 losses. So I came in as an advisor, as a U.S. Treasury advisor, and was starting to work in Treasury. And there was right in the middle of heavy tax reform. And for me, it was a great opportunity because I got involved in things that I would never have seen in the United States. And that's really, I think, the story for a lot of U.S. expats. Yes, you can be in America, blah, 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 but you get opportunities here with great people that you would not get elsewhere. So having been in the U.S. Treasury program, then the South African Treasury government hired me, and I've been here ever since.
We're going to discuss this in some detail a little bit later, but from a tax perspective, resettling in another country, particularly from the States, for instance, was it a very difficult, was it an arduous process?
Look, tax law is very domestic, so you have to know your law. I was in a very good position because I was very central. So because I was able to work with a lot of people, you just had to be open for new ideas and new exploration, which made the job more fun. But the rules are similar. But English is not English. So American English is not the same as UK English, which is not the same as South African English. And when you're a lawyer, you've got to be very precise.
So lots of subtlety and nuance, yeah.
So the point, though, is when you come to a new country, you need to come with an attitude that you're here to learn and grow, not that you know it all, which sometimes is a problem for Americans.
We're going to talk about comparison of tax policy in just a moment. Yeah. But Marisa, this is a good opportunity to bring you into the conversation. For the uninitiated, just explain the role of Expatweb to me, particularly in helping people like a Keith, for instance, in settling in this country.
Expatweb is a service provider that really looks after expatriates. So whether you are a foreign national coming into South Africa or a South African moving abroad, we really try to look after you from a holistic perspective. And that, of course, starts with the visa process. That's the first thing that you look at when you go to a new country. In terms of immigration law, which visa should I apply for? What does that entail? Would I qualify? How long does that take? Can I bring my family with me? And really just needing support from expert advisor to get onto the right path and to support you through that process.
Is it very confusing? Is it difficult to do?
I think if you are not a career expat, which many people are, but if you are moving to a new country for the first time, it can be a very scary process. You are not in your home country where your ID document takes you from A to B. You need to have authorization to be in that country. You need to have authorization to do the activities that you want to do in that country. You don't have the freedom of being a national of that country and being able to do everything that a national can. So it's really important to have the correct visa, get through the process correctly, and then to understand what you are able to do in terms of your immigration status, what you have access to, and what your limitations are.
Do people make a lot of mistakes in that respect?
Unfortunately, yes. It is more complex than it looks from the outside. It looks like a list of documents that I must put together and submit, but unfortunately not. As it is with, I think, any home office around the world, when you do a visa application, there's certain nuances. There's the law and then there's what works in practice. And it helps to have professional support to really guide you through that so that you can have a first-time correct application, a first-time successful issuance, and don't need to go through an extremely painful process before relocating.
Because it sets the tone of what is going to come, and that is so important. That's just visas. We're going to get to work permits in a while. Sure. But Keith, back to you. Tax policies in the United States of America compared to South Africa. What should potential expatriates be aware of? What do they need to consider?
The rules are all very, very similar, but from a U.S. expat point of view, they have their unique problems. So any foreigner coming to South Africa knows that if they're there too long, they can be subject to worldwide tax. But most of the people that we're talking about here are planning to stay here 1, 2, 3, and 4 years. So the main issue is the South Africans have a 5-year test. If you go beyond the 5-year period in days, you will then become a worldwide South African tax resident. But for most people, they're here on a 2 to 4 year journey. The goal is to make sure to keep their days limited, but that's not a problem under the 5-year period. And the main issue is they've got to pay local taxes in South Africa for local South African activities. So they will have to file a return. So let's say you've been stationed abroad, here you are in Johannesburg, and you're working. That salary is going to be subject to South African tax.
And the same rates apply, there's no difference at all?
Yeah, the same rates as South Africa. The difficulty for Americans, which is very unusual, is that if you're from the UK and you come here, you only have to worry about South Africa. But if you're an American, you always have to worry about American worldwide tax as long as you're a citizen. So you have to keep track at home as well as here, far more than you would as another expat.
And typically, where do people make mistakes in this respect?
Well, I think most people make mistakes because they're sick of filing 2 forms, right? Even in the UK, you've still got stuff back in the UK. So let's say you come here, you work here, but you still have to worry about your UK assets back home. So now you have to do with 2 processes, and you really need a person to help you through the system. Sure, you might learn the tax system, maybe you can file, but the first problem is you have to be registered in South Africa. Correct. That sounds simple, but you need a person to help you register. And then you've got to pay your taxes locally. And a lot of people get lazy and they think they're going to not do it and then don't do it. And then there's a problem, so that you could be in trouble with the South African authorities. But the other thing too is you have to worry about back home. You don't want to pay double tax. So you want to make sure that things are registered properly here so that you can get your credits back home so you're not subject to double tax. So you really need to keep track of your local accountant and your local US or your local foreign as well as your local SA. And you need to get to it early because you got to coordinate the 2 tax returns.
Just for the record, this is a form-free podcast. You don't have to fill anything out.
Thank God.
So, in case you were worried. How closely monitored or policed is this entire process for expatriates?
Well, the expats are probably closely monitored on their local employment income because the employer has to worry about it. So there are other activities the employer's not really worried about, but whatever payments an employer makes, they need to be subject to withholding tax on that. So that's where the real leg is in. But other issues might come up as you stay here longer, and the problem is once you're an employer, you're probably going to be picked up on the SARS system somehow. And remember, SARS wants to match the employer's calculation with your calculation. And increasingly, if the commissioner sees a mismatch, you could be picked up.
So, Marisa, what advice or help could Xpatweb give in this respect? Because I'm assuming that you might very well be the first port of call.
Absolutely. So once we've done the visa application, our next step would be to introduce you to the tax team. And the tax team would help you not just with the administrative part of registering and filing your tax returns, but they really get very involved in the planning side of things. As a team, we are expertly staffed in terms of international tax.
What does the planning side of things actually mean? Can you amplify that for me a bit?
Sure. So from a planning perspective, you have 2 filing jurisdictions. There is the possibility of triggering tax residency in South Africa where you become worldwide tax. So you really want to plan ahead in terms of when do you want to trigger that tax residency. Depending on what your nationality is, that planning could look different. And depending on what your wealth is, that planning could look different.
Your basic salary isn't a lot of planning, but the main thing is you want to get all your forms right to prevent double tax.
Yeah.
So in the old world, you were trying to go for non-taxation, right? You could just kind of skip both jurisdictions, hide in the middle, pay no tax to anybody. Those were fun days. Those days are over.
Days are gone, yes.
Really, I'm very unfortunate. Now you got to worry that everybody wants your money and they want to tax you twice. So you want to make sure your forms are right so that you don't get taxed twice. The second thing with planning is, okay, you've made some money. It's earned in South Africa. Well, you're going to have to pay South African tax. You got to, if you have to worry about it at home, you want to make sure you're not double taxed. That's all. But the issue is how much money are you saving? What are you doing with that savings? What are you doing with your local assets? You could put the money abroad or you could put it here. So you need to think about the tax implications of where you put it, because who's going to claim tax on it? And again, you don't want to be subject to double tax.
But you've got to balance that with optimum return on investment.
Of course.
Adding on to that is, of course, in South Africa, we've got exchange control. So that's another area where we would assist you from an Xpatweb perspective, is how do you bring your money in to South Africa? How do you bring it in under the correct coding in terms of the Reserve Bank so that you can exit it again at a later stage? And then how do you bring it in and convert it to South African Rand at the best rate possible? You need a very good banking partner to do that. And that is something that we will absolutely support our expatriate clients
I'm
on.
going to assume for the purposes of this conversation, people are not bringing their money in a large suitcase. Let's talk a little bit about the coding. What do you mean by that? What do people need to be aware of in that respect?
In South Africa, we've got exchange control, so that means any funds coming in or going out of the country needs to be registered with the South African Reserve Bank. And you need to then declare to the Reserve Bank what is the source of that money coming in and what's the purpose of that money coming in. Are you bringing it in to purchase a property, for example? Then you need to bring it in as investment to purchase a property, and that's important if you later decide to sell your property and you want to exit that money again. You need to have brought it in correctly to be able to exit it again under the correct code. So that's extremely important.
Yeah, so I mean, exchange control in South Africa is very unique because it's mostly designed to make sure South Africans keep their money in the country. The question is, as a foreigner, you don't want to be deemed to be in the exchange control net.
Correct.
So if you're in the net, then you have a problem and you want to keep your money out of that exchange control net. But it's also part of a larger issue, which is she alluded to, which is the banks. Now these days, whichever country you have to worry about, the know your client rules, the banking rules, making sure your bank accepts it, the other bank accepts it. If they see something funny, even if it's not nefarious, you might find that your bank won't accept the money. And again, in the case where, let's say you are a foreigner, you come in here, that's great, you're South African, you buy a home, right? You're starting to look like maybe a South African resident. Once you start looking like a South resident, then pulling the money out, do you need to go through the financial immigration process to take the money out when you leave? So there's all subtleties, which is paper. It's not theory. You can listen to as many YouTubes as you want, but you need somebody who can deal with the banks on a day-to-day level in order to get that through.
I would like to add one thing, and that is just, even though South Africa has exchange control, you can absolutely take your money out. So that is a myth that is out there, that your money will get stuck in South Africa. It is not. There's just some paperwork and some administration that needs to go with it. But you can absolutely get your money out, and you can get all your money out.
I want to pivot slightly. Let's talk a little bit about the current landscape for obtaining work permits. Is it difficult?
Yes.
That's a nice blunt answer.
In short, yes.
Yeah.
The longer answer is you can absolutely get a work permit to come into South Africa. If you qualified, there will not be an instance where you don't get a work permit. But again, you need to navigate the immigration system in South Africa. Unfortunately, we are dealing with a Department of Home Affairs who's severely backlogged at the moment. So it's taking long to process visas, or longer than usual. If you're coming in on a first-time basis, your visa will be processed by the South African Embassy in your home country, and that is going slightly quicker. So you don't sit with the backlog issue in terms of embassies, but you sit with the nuances of how to really prepare that application.
The difference between a work permit and a visa, are we talking about the same thing here?
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So in 2014, the Immigration Act got rewritten, and anything that's temporary in nature now gets called a visa. So you have a work visa, and then anything permanent will be called the permanent residence permit.
It's important to ask that question because people who are listening to us who are considering coming here might not see the distinction. The backlog, let's talk about that if we can. Is it being overcome? Because it can be frustrating for people, can't it?
Absolutely, it's frustrating, and there's definitely a plan. It really it's at head office, so it impacts those who want to renew their visas or those who are applying for permanent residency permits. Any first-time applicants who are coming in are not impacted by the backlog. Then yes, there's many programs currently in place. So one of them is the Trusted Employer Scheme, where the department is looking at giving different services to large corporates and multinationals who bring a lot of foreign staff in, to give them a more streamlined process, less documentation burden, quicker processing time. So that's one of the areas that they're looking at. And then, of course, it really is a capacity issue. So it is bringing in more resources to be able to work through that backlog. Then the other area is that they are prioritizing certain categories of visas, especially those that contribute to the economic sector. So
Which I guess does make sense.
Yeah.
It does make sense, absolutely.
Yeah, you'll get your visa, but it's timing. And so a lot of the frustration is, okay, I'm up for renewal and I still haven't heard. And now all of a sudden you get nervous. And then you're probably dealing with the clients. It takes a lot of work to do this job because the timing issues become very, very important. And so I think while they've liberalized themselves legally, the problem here in our government is we're not spending enough time servicing the regulations. And so you need somebody to help you to speed things along. Not because you're trying to do anything nefarious, you just want to do things within time. And I think that's where you see a lot of frustrations in a lot of spaces, and you really need help, otherwise you're dead. You're gonna freak out at home, and your wife's gonna be upset, or your husband. What are we doing? Are you sure we're gonna get it? This is where I think a lot of the noise is coming.
Which tells me you need to go to an expert to help you do this, which is the reason why we are sitting around this table. This is going to be the subject of a more detailed podcast later in the series, but Marisa, the healthcare system in South Africa, let's just touch on that very, very quickly. As far as expatriates are concerned, what questions are they either asking or should be asking?
So I think from a healthcare perspective, South Africa has got a pretty good reputation. We are well known to have a good, solid healthcare system. We have a private healthcare system as well as a public healthcare system. As an expatriate, you would typically belong to a private healthcare system. We've got very good hospitals, doctors available in the country.
As a foreigner here, I have found my medical care here is better than the United States. And we have really very good medical care. If you are an expat, you can probably afford it. At this stage, it's wonderful. I've done a lot of things. We really have a very good healthcare system that's going on, and that isn't a problem for you at all. And I would say just generally as a foreigner coming in, typically when I have friend foreigners coming in, they find life in South Africa very comfortable. Well, we know that we have an inequality problem. The people who come here are usually on the richer side of life, and so they usually find themselves in more comfortable places. So they can get their kids to decent private school, you have a decent system around you. Healthcare is excellent here. And the medical rates are very, very low. So one of the things that people ask me about is, how's medical care at home? It's so much more expensive in the U.S. and Europe. So the big thing is a lot of people come here for dentistry. My father had dentist problems, so he had to pay $25,000 to fix his teeth. $25,000.
I'm not even going to try the exchange rate. Just keep going, because it'll just upset everyone.
But just talking about the exchange rate. So if you want to buy orthodontia for your kids, it's 30,000 Rand here. In the United States, it's going to be 100 to 150,000 Rand. But you also have good doctors. We have a lot of very good medical care. The medical schemes that we have are very good. The hospitals are good. Once you get here, most foreigners go, wow, this is really comfortable. And when they look at exchange rates and they look at the price of living, like homes, so the biggest issue is, okay, 15,000 Rand in Dubai will get you a one-bedroom apartment. 15,000 Rand here will get you a sizable little house. And even an expensive house here is nothing next to what it's going to cost you in New York. You find as the expats come here and they go, well, this is a great lifestyle. I really like this. It's comfortable. I've got a decent school for my kids. Now, we do have crime, but the enclaves, you're typically going to be in an enclave, which are fairly large, and it's fairly comfortable. So you'll find a lot of people really not wanting to leave.
You're listening to Southbound, Settling in South Africa. It's a podcast guide and companion for anyone looking to call this vibrant nation their home. We hope you're enjoying the conversation, and if you have a moment, please rate us on whatever platform you find us. We're known in this country for our rich diversity. We have a real cultural mosaic in this country. That's a good thing, and it does impact on interaction and on daily life. In the many years that you've been here, how have you experienced that?
People are a little bit defensive. Are we good enough? But what I have found is they'd say, well, people come to South Africa for the weather. I go, no, you actually come to South Africa for the people. People here are very open, very friendly.
Weather's not bad, by the way. I'm looking out the window, 32 degrees, clear blue skies.
That
It's
also
pretty
helps.
good. Yeah.
It also helps. But
And
that's
it's not even midsummer yet.
That isn't the main attraction here. So for me, the people are very open. They're very open to foreigners. They might tease Americans a lot, but they're very curious. And so I have found people of all lives very friendly. I also find people not as political. So in the United States, it's very, very political. It's becoming very, very political in the UK, in Australia as well. People are much more understanding. Despite all the issues we've had, we have a certain cultural consensus where there's an openness to even ideas we don't like. And most people are curious and friendly, and you'll find that that's another reason why people like it. They just find it a very open and friendly environment.
So, Marisa, you'll have a client standing in front of you. You've dealt with the work permit issue or the visa issue. You've spoken about tax registration. But they might also ask you about how to optimally integrate into South African society as quickly as possible. The do's and the don'ts. So, I mean, obviously the do's would be to learn the rules of rugby very quickly.
Absolutely.
But it's more than that. What would you tell them?
In South Africa, we've got very large communities of expatriates. It's essential to really get to speak to the right property agent, whether you're going to be renting or purchasing. You want to be staying in the right area. The expatriate communities tend to cluster together.
But that's worldwide, I guess.
Absolutely. So you want to get some advice around that to make sure that you land in the right area where you really have the support that you need. You want to be close to schools if that is needed. You want to be close to your health clubs and your sport clubs and your activities that you're going to be spending lots of time on.
And this is advice that your company will give.
Absolutely. We have a large network that we will put you in touch with the right people to put you in the right places and to give you the right advice wherever you need.
A lot of our conversation is focused on people who are coming here to work. But Keith, I'm looking at you because you've got grey hair, just like me. It's also a popular destination for retirees. I guess a whole different set of rules apply and different motivations. We'll look at that in a later podcast. It's an attractive place for the older demographic.
Absolutely. It depends where. Again, I think people generally go to the Cape Town area, the Durban. People like to near water.
Near the ocean.
That's the big thing. The weather is comfortable all year round. So when you get older, that uncomfortable weather bothers you a lot more. The price of housing is so much cheaper that people can get a beautiful house, or convert that to pounds in the UK, you're not going to get anything nearly as much. It's a very comfortable living. I mean, when she said about people needing to be near foreigners, one of the things that I would advise people is don't just hang near foreigners. South Africans are very open. Just don't be arrogant. Sometimes that's hard for us, but don't be arrogant. Be friendly, and it's a very welcoming thing. Be part of the community. It's very easy to get acclimated with the local lifestyle. So if you're going to the right places, you've got a very comfortable living wherever you want to be. In many ways, it's just like home, but more convenient. And so for a lot of foreigners to stay here 6 to 8 months out of a year, that can be a great thing.
One thing I would add to that is that we live in a country where there are 11 official languages. Make an effort. We're not asking people to learn every single language off by heart, but I guess that applies the world over. But in this country, it goes a long way, doesn't it, Marisa?
Oh, absolutely. It will definitely get you that friendly face that you were talking about earlier. We obviously deal with expatriates every day, and you can see as you engage with them the first time when they come in, then when you engage with them again 4 or 5 years later when their visa's coming up for renewal, how they've really start picking up on the lingo and the language nuances, which is always fun to see.
And they've learned how to light a braai fire.
Absolutely, and they've learned to call it a braai and not a barbecue.
Not a barbecue. I was just about to say that. Folks, final question to both of you. Is there one piece of advice or is there an insight that you'd like to leave our listeners with as they consider possibly making South Africa a new home? Keith, to you first.
Well, let me just come from a career point of view. I think what is great about South Africa is you've got a lot of expertise. And what is nice is you can get access to the top level people very, very quickly. That has done me a great thing in my career because I managed to deal with a lot of high level people, the top of the top. These people can easily compete with London, New York. but you're not so far down the totem pole. And so it really helps to move your career forward. And for me, the main thing is not to think you know it all. Really go in there. They'll respect you. When you come to South Africa, you treat people decently. They really treat you, put you in a bit of a pedestal as well. Don't let it go to your head. Meet a lot of the people, respect what they've done, but you have a chance to engage here in a level of work that you can't engage with home, and it can really shoot you forward.
Marisa, beat that. That's a pretty good answer.
From my perspective, I advise those who are looking to come into the country to really approach it from a roadmap perspective. You want to be planning ahead. I would like to get to South Africa in the next couple of months and really map it out and get a plan into place and speak to the experts who can tell you realistically how this plan is going to work. Get good advice up front. We spoke about tax planning. There's obviously some immigration planning. If you want to bring funds in, you need to plan around that. Where you're going to stay. So there's lots of elements about relocating that need to be planned, and having a holistic advisor who can take you through that will go a long way.
And much of what we've touched on in episode 1, we are going to expand on in greater detail in upcoming episodes. Keith Engel, Marisa Jacobs, thank you very much indeed. On our next episode of Southbound, we're going to be talking about moving money, regulations and processes for moving money into South Africa and tax residency. We alluded to it. We'll push that out in a little bit more detail. What all of this means, how to achieve it, and also its implications for financial planning. Goodbye to you, and thank you for listening.